The weight of what we carry, a story of a family secret, hidden truth, and the grace that covers all. The truth will set you free. John 8:32. Every family has a room they don't go into, not a physical room, though sometimes it is that too. A room in the story of the family, a door that everyone knows is there and that everyone has agreed, without ever saying so directly, never to open. The agreement is maintained through habit and through love and through the particular, unspoken understanding that some things, if they are let out, cannot be put back. The Nakamura family of Portland, Oregon had such a room. They had been keeping it locked for 41 years. 3 generations of careful living, careful presentation, careful silence on the one subject that sat underneath all the other subjects like a fault line beneath a city, present, unacknowledged, and capable, if the right pressure was applied from the right direction, of changing the surface of everything above it. The pressure arrived on a Sunday afternoon in the form of a DNA ancestry kit. Specifically, the results of a DNA ancestry kit belonging to Kenji Nakamura, age 22, who had ordered it online for $40 as a birthday gift to himself and who received the results with the casual curiosity of a young man who expects to find what he already knows. He did not find what he already knew. What he found instead opened the room that had been locked for 41 years. And what came out of that room would either destroy his family or save it. It did both in ways nobody anticipated. Before we move forward with the story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help us to grow this channel to uplift more people. The Nakamura family was, by every visible measure, one of the most composed and admired families in their community. Hiroshi Nakamura, 66, retired civil engineer, a man of exact sentences and measured opinions, who had been known his entire adult life for 2 things: his precision and his pride. His pride was not arrogance. It was something quieter and more deeply rooted. It was the pride of a man whose own parents had survived the internment camps of the 1940s and had rebuilt their lives from nothing with the specific, steely dignity of people who refused to be defined by what had been done to them. Hiroshi carried that legacy as both inheritance and obligation. The Nakamura name meant something. He had spent 40 years making sure it continued to mean it. His wife, Fumiko, was 63, a retired high school art teacher whose quietness was not timidity but depth. She had a gift for seeing what was underneath the surface of things and a long-practiced habit of keeping what she saw to herself until the right moment. She had known about the room for 41 years. She had never once tried the door. Their daughter, Yuki, was 40, a pediatric nurse, calm under pressure, the person in every crisis that others turn to. She lived 15 minutes away with her husband Daniel and their 2 teenage children, and their son, Kenji, 22, just graduated from Oregon State, living at home for the summer before starting a job in Seattle in September. Curious, earnest, with the specific fearlessness of a young person who has not yet accumulated the reasons for caution that experience eventually provides. The family was Buddhist, not in the devotional, daily practice sense, but in the deep cultural sense of third-generation Japanese-American identity. The altar in Hiroshi's study with the small Buddha figure and the incense and the photographs of his parents was not primarily religious expression. It was memory. It was continuity. It was the way he maintained a thread to the people he came from. He visited the Japanese garden in Portland on the anniversary of his parents' passing every year. He taught Kenji and Yuki the proper forms of respect for those who came before. He did not talk about everything that had come before. Kenji opened the email on a Sunday morning in July at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and no particular sense of anticipation. He read the results. He read them again. He set the coffee down. The ethnicity breakdown was what he expected, predominantly Japanese, with the small European percentages that ancestry kits sometimes produce from distant, forgotten crossings. That was all unremarkable. What was remarkable was the DNA relative matches. There was a name at the top of the list, a close match. The algorithm estimated first cousin or half sibling, a name he did not recognize, an account that had a photograph attached, a woman in her late 30s, dark haired, with eyes that looked, and this was what made Kenji's coffee go cold in the cup in front of him, that looked recognizably, unmistakably like his father's eyes. Her name on the profile was listed as Marisol Tanaka Reyes. Kenji sat at the kitchen table for 40 minutes. His father came in for coffee. Kenji closed the laptop. He said nothing. He went to his room. He messaged Marisol Tanaka Reyes through the Ancestry platform at 11:15 that morning. She responded within the hour. Her story, as she told it to Kenji over 3 messages and then a 90-minute phone call, was complete and specific in the way of someone who had known it for a long time and had been waiting for someone from the other side to ask. She was 38 years old. She had been raised by her mother, Catalina Reyes, in Sacramento. Her mother had told her when she was 16 that her biological father was a Japanese American man named Hiroshi Nakamura, whom Catalina had met in Sacramento in the early 1980s. They had been together briefly, a relationship that Catalina described as genuine and significant, and that had ended before Catalina discovered she was expecting. She had not told Hiroshi. Whether this was a decision of pride or protection, or some combination of both, Catalina had never fully explained. She had married a man named Eduardo Tanaka 2 years later, a Japanese Mexican-American man who had given Marisol his name and raised her as his own, and who had been, by Marisol's account, a good and present father. Marisol had known about Hiroshi since she was 16. She had looked for him over the years, not urgently, not with any particular agenda, but with the quiet, persistent curiosity of a person who has a question that has never been answered. She had submitted her DNA 2 years ago as part of that search. She had not expected to find a half-brother first. She said in the phone call, "I don't want to disrupt anything. I want you to know that. I have wanted to know where I came from for a long time." Kenji said, "I understand." He did not yet understand, but he was beginning to. Kenji spent a week with this information alone. He was 22 years old, and he was holding something that belonged to his entire family, and he did not know what to do with it. He called his college roommate. He went on a long run. He sat in his room at 2 in the morning looking at the photograph on Marisol's ancestry profile, the eyes that looked like his father's eyes, and felt the specific, paralyzing weight of information that cannot be unknown. He called Yuki. She drove over that Saturday morning while their parents were at the garden. They sat in Kenji's room, and he showed her the profile and played her a recording of part of the phone call with Marisol's permission. Yuki was very still. She said, "Does Dad know she exists?" "I don't know." "Does Mom know?" "I don't know." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "We have to tell them." Kenji said, "It could destroy everything." Yuki said, "Keeping it could destroy it more slowly." She looked at her brother. "We come from people who survived the camps by not breaking, but not breaking is not the same as not bending. Dad needs to know that there is someone out there who is his." They told them at Sunday dinner, not because Sunday dinner was the ideal setting. It was not. It was the next time all four of them were in the same room, and Kenji had decided that he could not carry it through one more week. He did not lead with the DNA kit. He led with Marisol. He said her name. He said the relationship. He said she was 38 years old and had been raised in Sacramento. He put his laptop on the table with her profile photograph on the screen. The table was very quiet. Fumiko looked at the photograph. She looked at Hiroshi. Hiroshi looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he looked at his hands on the table. He did not speak for a long time. Yuki said quietly, "Dad," he said, "I knew about Catalina." His voice was even, exact. "I did not know about a child." The table absorbed this, yes. Fumiko said, "How long have you known that this was possible?" He said, 41 years. It was the first time the room had been opened in 41 years. What came out of it was complicated and painful and real. A conversation that lasted 4 hours and covered things that Hiroshi had kept in the sealed room for longer than his children had been alive. His time in Sacramento, Catalina, the relationship and its ending, his return to Portland, his meeting of Fumiko the following year, his silence, chosen, maintained, justified to himself in ways that he would spend the following weeks re-examining. He had not known about Marisol. That truth mattered. It did not make the 41 years of silence about what had been possible uncomplicated. Fumiko cried once, briefly, and then did not cry again. She was not a woman who processed things in front of people, even the people she loved most. Kenji watched his father, the precise man, the composed man, the man who carried the Nakamura name as an obligation, sit at the Sunday dinner table and look, for the first time in Kenji's memory, like a man who did not know what to do. The week that followed was the hardest week the Nakamura family had experienced in a generation. Hiroshi was quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. The usual quiet was productive, contained. This was the quiet of a man sitting with himself and not finding the sitting comfortable. Fumiko was present and functional and said very little, which meant she was processing something significant. Yuki called every day. Daniel, her husband, gave her the space to navigate it and the presence to come home to, which was its own form of love. And Kenji, who had opened the room, who had put the laptop on the table, who had been 22 years old and carrying a family's fault line for a week before handing it to the people who could actually hold it, Kenji went for a lot of runs. On Thursday, Hiroshi came to Kenji's room. He sat in the desk chair. Kenji was on the bed, and he said, "You did the right thing," telling us, "I want you to know that I know that." Kenji said, "I wasn't sure." Hiroshi said, "Neither was I for most of this week." He looked at his hands. "I have been thinking about what it means to carry something alone versus what it means to let it be carried by the people who love you." A pause. "I chose alone for 41 years. I think I chose wrong." It was the most his father had ever said to him about anything interior. Kenji did not say anything, he just nodded. Hiroshi called Marisol himself. The call lasted an hour. Kenji was not in the room for it. What he knew of it, he knew from what his father said afterward, that she had been gracious, that she had been clear, that she had no expectations beyond knowing, that she had a life that was full and good, and that her desire to know her biological father was not the desire of someone who was missing something, but the desire of someone who was curious about the whole picture. She came to Portland 6 weeks later. The meeting took place at the house. Fumiko had insisted on the house, which Kenji understood as a statement. This would be met with the full weight of the family, not a neutral location. She walked in with the specific, careful energy of someone who does not know what reception to expect and is prepared for several different versions of it. Hiroshi stood in the entry. For a moment, just a moment, they looked at each other. She had his eyes, not just in the way the photograph had suggested. In person, it was more specific than that. The shape of them, the particular quality of attention in them. He said, "You look like my mother." Her composure moved, briefly. Then she gathered it. She said, "I've been told I look like my grandmother." He said, "Come in." The afternoon was not the tearful, cinematic reunion of a movie. It was something more realistic and more significant. 5 people in a living room, learning the shape of a new thing, making room for something that had existed without their knowledge and was now present and required a response. Marisol had brought photographs of her mother Catalina, of Eduardo Tanaka, who had raised her, of her own children, 2 of them, who were in Sacramento with their father this weekend. She passed them around. Fumiko looked at each one for a long time. She said, "Your children are beautiful." Marisol said, "Thank you." There was, in that exchange, something that Yuki would later tell Daniel about, a specific quality of Fumiko receiving Marisol, not as an intrusion but as a fact, not what Fumiko would have chosen, what was true, and Fumiko, who had always been the person in the family who saw what was underneath the surface, had looked underneath and found something she could make room for. Marisol was in Portland for a long weekend. On Saturday morning, her second day, she mentioned, almost as an aside, that she attended church on Saturdays. She had been a Seventh-day Adventist for 12 years, she explained. She had found the church in her late 20s through a colleague, and it had become, she said simply, the center of her life. Kenji, who had no plans, said, "Can I come?" She looked at him. "You're not Christian." "No," he said, "but I've been thinking about a lot of things this week." He went. The church was called Bridgeway Seventh-day Adventist Church, a congregation of about 80 people in a converted building in northeast Portland. Kenji sat beside Marisol, his half-sister, a word he was still learning to hold, and felt the specific experience of a person in an unfamiliar space who is, nonetheless, not uncomfortable. Pastor Hirohito Saito was 60 years old, Japanese American, with the specific quality of a man who had found something real and had been quietly, consistently living it for a long time. He preached that morning from John 8. He read verse 32, "The truth will set you free." He said, this verse is very often quoted without its context. Jesus was speaking to people who believed they were already free, who believed their heritage, their lineage, their family standing gave them a freedom that could not be taken, and Jesus looked at them and said, "That is not what I mean. The freedom I am describing is not inherited. It is not a function of your name or your history or the family you come from." He paused. The freedom I am describing is what happens when you stop living inside a lie, whether a lie told to you or a lie you have been telling yourself, or a lie that has simply been maintained so long it has started to feel like truth. The truth, specifically the truth about who God is and who you are to Him, is what actually sets you free. Kenji sat very still. He thought about the locked room, about 41 years of maintained silence, about a DNA kit and a Sunday dinner and his father's hands on the table. He thought about the truth and what it had cost. He thought about what it had given back. That evening, Kenji came home and found his father in the study. Hiroshi was sitting in front of the altar, the small Buddha figure, the incense, the photographs of his parents. He was not meditating. He was simply sitting, looking. Kenji told him about the church service, about Pastor Saito, about John 8:32, and what had been said about inherited freedom versus the freedom that comes from truth. His father listened. He said, "What did you feel in that room?" Kenji thought about it honestly. He said, like something was being said that I had needed to hear and hadn't known I needed to hear. His father was quiet. He looked at the altar, at the photographs of his parents, the people who had survived the camps, who had rebuilt, who had handed him the obligation of the name. He said, "My parents were not Buddhist in the devotional sense. It was cultural, identity, the way you know where you came from." He touched the edge of the frame. "But I have been sitting here for 40 years asking the same question and not getting an answer." Kenji said, "What question?" His father said, "Whether the things I have carried were mine to carry alone. Whether there is something that can actually hold what a person cannot hold by themselves." The study was quiet. Kenji said, "I think Marisol found that thing." His father looked at him. He said, "I think maybe we should find out." 6 months later, Hiroshi and Fumiko Nakamura attended Bridgeway Seventh-day Adventist Church for the first time. Not because Kenji had pushed, not because Marisol had invited them with any pressure, because Hiroshi had, over 6 months of quiet and reading and one long conversation with Pastor Saito at a coffee shop in northeast Portland, arrived somewhere he had not expected to arrive. He had arrived at the conclusion that the thing he had been missing was not a different version of what he already had, but something categorically different. Not heritage, not culture, not the maintenance of a name, but relationship. Specific, personal, living relationship with the one who had made him and who knew about the room that had been locked for 41 years and who had not, apparently, stopped waiting for the door to open. The service was held in a room with 80 people. Pastor Saito did not know the Nakamuras were coming. Kenji had not told him. Hiroshi sat in the third row beside his wife. Yuki and Daniel were there. Kenji was there. Marisol, who had driven up from Sacramento for the weekend, was there. The family occupied an entire row. A family that had not known its full shape 6 months ago. A family that was still learning that shape, still navigating the complicated, non-linear work of incorporating a truth that had been hidden for 41 years, still having the conversations, still sitting in the places where things were not yet resolved, but together, in the same row. After the service, Pastor Saito found Hiroshi in the fellowship hall. He said, "First time?" Hiroshi said, "Yes." The pastor said, "What brought you in?" Hiroshi was quiet for a moment. He looked at the room, at Fumiko talking to a woman near the coffee table, at Yuki holding her husband's hand, at Kenji laughing at something Marisol had said. He said, "The truth set us free. I wanted to find out more about the one who said that." Pastor Saito looked at him steadily. He said, "That's the best reason I've heard in a long time. The Nakamura family's story carries a truth that is both ancient and completely current." John 8:32. "The truth will set you free" is one of the most quoted verses in all of Scripture. It is also one of the most misunderstood. People apply it broadly, abstractly to information in general, but Jesus said it in a specific context. He was speaking about the truth about himself, about who he was and what he offered, about a freedom that was not inherited, not earned, not maintained through the careful management of appearances. The Nakamuras had maintained appearances with genuine love and genuine effort for 41 years. The maintenance was not malicious. It was the way Hiroshi knew how to protect the people he loved, which was the same way he had been protected, which was the way his parents had been protected before him. But protected and free are different things. The locked room protected everyone in the house from the pain of what was inside it. It also prevented Marisol from knowing where she came from for 38 years. It also cost Hiroshi 41 years of sitting in front of an altar asking a question that the altar was not equipped to answer. Here is the lesson. Truth kept in a locked room does not disappear. It waits. And the longer it waits, the more the door strains against its hinges. A DNA kit is $40. The truth it releases is priceless and cannot be recontained. But, and this is the second part of the lesson, the part that the Nakamura story demonstrates, the truth does not only destroy. When it is received with love, with the willingness to sit with the difficulty and make room for what was hidden, it can build something that the locked room could never have held. Marisol in the family row, the full shape of the thing. The truth will set you free. It will also cost you something first. Both of those are in the verse. Both of those are true. And on the other side of what it costs is a freedom that the locked room could never have provided. The truth will set you free. John 8:32. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be notified about more inspirational stories on redemption and hope.